This is a land where, if you keep traveling west, every road eventually ends at the Atlantic Ocean. Along the way, small houses appear scattered across the fields. Smoke from chimneys drifts over stone walls, while people continue working outside beneath rain that can arrive at any moment. The sky is constantly changing. Sea winds move through every village. Then the land suddenly breaks away into sheer cliffs, where powerful waves repeatedly crash against the rocks directly below coastal farms and towns. This is Ireland, an island on the western edge of Europe, where millions of people live with unpredictable weather and an ocean that is always in sight. In remote rural areas, many families still raise livestock, work the land, and gather at local pubs. So, between modern cities, an ancient language, and communities connected across generations, what is life really like for the Irish people on this legendary land at the edge of the world? Located on the western edge of Europe, Ireland is one of the last stretches of land before the continent disappears into the Atlantic Ocean. To the east, it faces Britain across the Irish Sea, but along the western coast, cliffs, peninsulas, and small islands stand almost directly against an expanse of ocean stretching for thousands of kilometers. When you stand before the waves, there are almost no major cities or land masses left ahead. That vast emptiness gives Ireland the feeling of a place at the very edge of the world. The name Ireland can be confusing. The entire island is a single landmass, but politically it is divided into two parts. The Republic of Ireland covers most of the island and has its capital in Dublin. Northern Ireland consists of 6 counties in the northeast, has its capital in Belfast, and is part of the United Kingdom. The border runs through farmland and villages, but the two regions still use different political systems, currencies, and public services. The population is more concentrated in Dublin, Belfast, and the eastern regions, where employment, seaports, and transportation networks are more developed. The west is more sparsely populated. Small communities are scattered among grasslands, peat bogs, mountains, and a coastline divided by long bays. In the east, homes, schools, and workplaces are often located close together. But in many western areas, a trip to shop, visit a doctor, or attend school can involve traveling many kilometers along rural roads. This difference is not caused by geography alone. For centuries, political power, trade, and infrastructure were concentrated more heavily in the east, closer to Britain and the trade routes across the Irish Sea. The west retained more farming communities, fishing villages, and Irish-speaking regions, but it was also more deeply affected by poverty and migration. The Great Famine of the mid-19th century killed about 1 million people and forced another million to leave Ireland. Later waves of migration carried Irish people to Britain, the United States, Canada, Australia, and many other parts of the world. After the struggle for independence and the division of the island in the early 20th century, Irish identity continued to be shaped by memories of loss, separation, and those who had left. Ireland, therefore, lies not only on the geographical edge of Europe, it is also a land that has always looked in two directions. One side faces the continent, where opportunity and connection are concentrated. The other faces the Atlantic Ocean, where small communities have survived isolation, harsh weather, and generations of emigration. Before we continue, we would like to know which country you are watching this video from and what time it is where you live. Share your answer in the comments below so we can see where around the world this journey is being followed. If its position on the edge of Europe makes Ireland feel like the end of the world, then the Atlantic Ocean is the force that has shaped nearly everything on this island. Moist air masses constantly move in from the west, bringing rain, wind, and fog that can cover the hillsides within minutes. A bright sky can quickly turn grey. A brief shower may pass, followed by patches of sunlight, causing the weather to shift repeatedly within the same moment. Irish people call mild, damp days covered in drizzle a soft day. It is not heavy rain, but a thin layer of moisture suspended in the air, making the landscape appear softer and blurred. The prolonged wet climate keeps Ireland's grasslands green almost year-round, while also creating favorable conditions for cattle and sheep to graze outdoors. However, the abundance of water also makes many areas difficult to farm. In the west, peat bogs hold water like sponges. Thin soil and exposed rock have also forced generations of farmers to clear stones from their fields and stack them into dry stone walls stretching across the hillsides. Along the coast, waves and wind have carved deep bays, formed cliffs, and divided the land into peninsulas, small islands, and harbours sheltered behind the terrain. Life in Ireland therefore always operates according to the weather. Homes along the Atlantic coast are built to withstand strong winds and prolonged rain. Outdoor work must also be completed during the rare stretches of dry weather. On narrow roads, rain and fog often reduce visibility. Ferries to the islands and fishing boats may also have to change their schedules when the sea becomes rough. The Atlantic Ocean both sustains Ireland and creates challenges for the communities living near the coast. The wet climate keeps the grasslands green almost year-round, providing the foundation for dairy farming, beef production, and sheep farming. The surrounding waters also support the livelihoods of many fishing villages. However, a prolonged rainy season can flood fields, delay harvests, and force livestock indoors earlier than expected. Offshore, fishermen must work through strong currents, dense fog, and storms that can develop before their boats have time to return to port. On clear days, the ocean provides food, shades of blue, and much of Ireland's distinctive beauty. But when the wind changes direction and waves repeatedly strike the rocky coast, it reminds coastal communities that these waters have never been completely gentle. The Irish cannot control the Atlantic Ocean. They can only watch for its signs, adjust the rhythm of their lives, and continue working on a land where the weather can change within just a few hours. Life in Ireland has long revolved not only around individual households, but also around connections between generations. Grandparents often live near their children and grandchildren, help care for the younger ones, and preserve stories about the place where the entire family grew up. Young people may leave home to study, work in the city, or move abroad. But on weekends, during festivals, or at Christmas, many still return. To them, leaving does not mean cutting ties. Home remains the place they return to whenever their family needs them. In small communities, the local shop is rarely just a place to buy food. It is also where people exchange news, check in on one another, and notice who may need help. Village halls serve a similar role, hosting classes, meetings, sporting events, and fundraising nights to repair shared facilities or support a family facing hardship. Ireland continues to invest in these spaces because they help maintain services that would struggle to survive on profit alone in sparsely populated areas. This community spirit is reflected in the word Mythic. In Irish, it refers to a group of neighbours gathering to harvest crops or complete work that would be too demanding for one family alone. One person helps another today, and when that person faces difficulties, the entire community will be there. The form of collective work has changed over time, but the same principle continues through volunteer groups, local clubs, and fundraising activities. The pub is also part of this network. In many villages, it is where different generations meet, watch a game, listen to music, exchange news, or talk after a day of work. The value of a pub lies not only in the drinks it serves, but in its role as a shared living room for people who may live many kilometers apart. Studies in rural Ireland show that these spaces help build social connections and support local economic activity. Those bonds are also maintained inside the home. Conversations often begin around a pot of tea, accompanied by bread or cookies. On weekends, family meals and the traditional Sunday roast bring several generations back to the same table, where old stories are retold and those who have left home temporarily return to a familiar rhythm of life. Everything becomes more fragile when the last gathering places disappear. When a pub closes, a post office shuts down, or the final shop leaves a village, residents do not simply have to travel farther to buy goods and access services. Older people living alone lose another reason to step outside. Chance encounters become less frequent, and the village risks becoming a place where people only sleep for the night before driving somewhere else. Ireland's continued support for the post office network and its efforts to convert old buildings into community spaces show that this is not simply a business issue. It is an attempt to keep these places alive. In Ireland, communities are sustained by people returning home, cups of tea, full dinner tables, and the habit of showing up when a neighbor needs help. That is why, when the last gathering place disappears, what is lost is not just a service, but the ties that have kept generations close. In an increasingly modern society, Ireland continues to preserve its identity through Gaelic, a language that existed long before English became widely spoken. It is the national language and is still used in the Gaeltacht regions, located mainly along the western coast. Schools, road signs, radio programs, and everyday conversations help keep Gaelic alive, even as it faces pressure from migration and modern life. Gaeilge is also closely connected to the storytelling tradition. Before books, newspapers, and other forms of media became widespread, Seanchaí memorized legends, family histories, and local stories, then passed them down through spoken word. Traces of that tradition are still present in the way Irish people talk, where even a small piece of news can develop into a long, humorous story filled with details that only locals understand. When night falls, storytelling often gives way to music. During a seis-siún, musicians gather in the corner of a pub with fiddles, flutes, bodhráns, or accordions without the need for a stage. This tradition has been passed down through generations but remains open to newcomers. Local spirit is also clearly expressed on the sports field. Gaelic football and hurling are organised by the GAA, a network of clubs found in many towns and villages. Children train in their local colours. Adults volunteer as coaches and raise funds, while matches between counties can bring entire communities together. The GAA was founded in 1884 to preserve and develop Gaelic sports during a period when Irish identity was under significant pressure. On March 17th, that identity moves into the streets for St. Patrick's Day. In Ireland, it is a national holiday marked by parades, music, and gatherings. Unlike the green-covered celebrations often seen abroad, the day on the island retains its religious roots, while also giving Ireland an opportunity to reflect on its history and its connection with Irish communities around the world. Religion once played a central role in schools, families, and public life, but its influence is clearly declining. Along with immigration, Ireland is becoming an increasingly multicultural society where new traditions appear alongside long-established customs. These changes have not erased the foods connected to local memory. Soda bread is made from simple ingredients and still appears in many kitchens. Irish stew combines meat, potatoes, and vegetables, making it well-suited to the cold, damp climate. Potatoes evoke both survival and historical loss. Seafood, meanwhile, reflects the long relationship between coastal communities and the Atlantic Ocean. Irish identity, therefore, cannot be found in a single symbol. It exists in the Gaeilge spoken in the Gaeltacht, the stories passed down, the melodies played together, the colours of local clubs, and the food served at the table. Ireland is still changing, but its ability to carry old traditions into a new society has helped this land preserve a voice of its own. Leaving Dublin, office buildings quickly give way to grasslands, hedgerows, and farms passed down through generations. Irish agriculture remains closely tied to the family farm model, where the home, livestock, and daily work all share the same piece of land. The wet climate allows grass to grow almost year-round, making dairy cattle, beef cattle, and sheep the foundation of the rural economy. Milk is processed into butter, cheese, and a wide range of export products, while beef and sheep farming continue to provide income for communities outside the cities. In 2024, Ireland had more than 133,000 farms, while dairy products remained the country's largest category of agricultural exports. Along the Atlantic coast, the sea provides another source of income. From ports such as Killybegs, Castletown Bear, and Rosenmeal, fishing boats head offshore to catch pelagic fish, shellfish, and species found near the coast. Behind every voyage is an entire network of processing, transportation, and port services. However, the industry is under pressure from quotas, fuel costs, weather, and declining fish stocks. As a result, many coastal communities must find additional income through aquaculture, tourism, or service industries. For centuries, the land and sea determined most of the work available to Irish people. But beginning in the late 20th century, the economy started to shift dramatically. Foreign investment, education, and access to European markets helped Ireland develop its technology, pharmaceutical, medical device, and financial industries. Software offices, laboratories, and modern manufacturing facilities show how a country once heavily dependent on agriculture has become deeply integrated into global production and service networks. In 2025, the medical device, financial services, and chemical industries alone provided more than 138,000 jobs. Tourism has become a bridge connecting these two economies. Visitors come to Ireland for its cliffs, coastal routes, music, and historic towns, creating jobs for hotels, restaurants, transportation services, and small businesses. Nearly 70% of tourism jobs are located outside Dublin, helping many communities turn their landscapes and culture into sources of income, even without major factories or office centres. However, this transition has not taken place evenly. Dublin is home to many international headquarters, financial services firms, and high-paying technology jobs. Cork, Galway, and Limerick have also developed their own business clusters. Meanwhile, many small towns still depend on agriculture, seasonal tourism, and a limited number of employers. Average incomes in remote rural areas remain significantly lower than in commuter towns, while the percentage of people with university degrees is also lower. As a result, young people often have to leave their hometowns in search of opportunities, while remote areas struggle to retain skilled workers. Ireland today exists between two contrasting images. On one side are cattle grazing in the fields, fishing boats returning to port, and family farms still operating according to the seasons. On the other are data centers, laboratories, and financial contracts connected to global markets. Economic growth has transformed Ireland from a peripheral economy into a modern nation, but opportunities remain concentrated mainly around the cities. That divide is shaping where people work, build their futures, and whether they can continue living near the communities that raised them. In Ireland, where a person lives largely determines the rhythm of their daily life. In Dublin and other major cities, apartments, townhouses, and suburban neighborhoods stretch along transportation routes. Once outside the city, the landscape quickly changes to detached homes surrounded by fields and small towns. More than 4 out of 5 rural households live in detached houses, while nearly 70% of all apartments in the country are concentrated in cities. That difference is also clearly reflected in housing prices. In 2024, the median home price in cities reached about €435,000, compared with only around €210,000 in remote rural areas. However, cheaper housing does not necessarily mean an easier life, because jobs, universities, and specialized services remain concentrated mainly in urban areas. In Dublin alone, high rents force many young people to live with friends or strangers for years before they can afford a place of their own. Life in the capital also moves at a faster pace. Mornings begin on buses, trams, commuter trains, or among crowds walking through the city centre. Offices and universities keep Dublin active well into the evening. In smaller towns, meanwhile, the streets often become quiet earlier, and residents are more likely to run into familiar faces. In return, they may have to travel much farther to reach a hospital, a larger school, or their workplace. Rail lines connect Dublin with Belfast, Cork, Galway, Limerick, and many other cities. Buses serve both intercity and local routes, while ferries provide connections to offshore islands. TFY Local Link operates in rural areas where transportation options remain limited. Even so, outside the cities, a car is still almost essential. In 2022, 73% of commuters in rural areas influenced by nearby cities traveled by car, compared with less than 45% in urban areas. Because universities and career opportunities are concentrated in cities, many young people leave their hometowns after finishing high school. They move to Dublin, Cork, Galway, or Limerick to study and build their careers. Cities offer more opportunities, but they also require them to accept high rents, limited living space, and greater distance from their families. Remote work is gradually changing that choice. Ireland has developed a network of more than 400 connected work hubs, allowing some employees to continue working for city-based companies while living closer to home. However, this opportunity is mainly available to people whose jobs can be done on a computer. Many positions in services, healthcare, construction, or manufacturing still require workers to be physically present every day. Modern life in Ireland is therefore shaped by a constant tension. Cities provide education, employment, and opportunities for advancement. The countryside offers more space, a slower pace of life, and greater closeness to family. For many young people, the question is no longer which place they love more, but whether they can build a future in the place they truly want to call home. From the outside, Ireland may look like a rapidly developing country, with modern cities surrounded by vast green countryside. But for many residents, the most urgent challenge begins with finding a place to live. The housing supply has failed to keep pace with demand in areas where jobs are concentrated, while rent and home prices continue to consume a large share of young people's incomes. Many are forced to live with others for longer, move farther away from work, or delay plans to start a family. That pressure does not come from housing alone. The cost of food, energy, transportation, and everyday services is also rising, especially for households that rely heavily on cars. Housing in remote areas may be cheaper, but median incomes in isolated rural regions are significantly lower than in commuter towns. Access to employment, education, and healthcare is also uneven, making regional differences increasingly visible. In many small communities, the population is gradually aging as young people leave home to study and find work. Remote rural areas often have a higher average age and a larger proportion of dependents than urban areas. As the number of residents declines, local shops, banks, post offices, schools, and bus routes also become more difficult to maintain. Every service that closes makes daily life less convenient while giving the next generation another reason to leave. Tourism provides jobs and income. But in coastal towns and popular destinations, seasonal crowds can also place pressure on roads, the environment, public services, and the supply of short-term housing. Ireland must therefore find ways to develop tourism without pushing local communities out of the very places that created the region's appeal. Offshore, the Atlantic Ocean continues to create one of the greatest pressures. Powerful storms can disrupt transportation, damage infrastructure, and isolate small islands. In the coming decades, rising sea levels and storm surges are expected to increase erosion and flooding, forcing some communities to choose between protecting the coastline, changing the way they build, or leaving areas that have been inhabited for generations. Ireland's green landscape therefore hides a question that is becoming increasingly difficult to answer. How can the country maintain affordable housing, preserve essential services, protect its language, and help coastal communities continue to survive? Because a place can still look beautiful on a map, even when the people who once brought it to life can no longer afford to stay. Despite the pressures of housing, living costs, and job opportunities, many Irish people still choose to remain connected to the place where they were born. The reason can rarely be measured by a number. It is having parents who live only a few streets away, grandparents who still remain in the familiar family home, and neighbors who have known one another for generations. In small communities, family life is always connected to the school, the shop, the pub, and the local club. A GAA club may be where a child first steps onto a practice field, where parents stand along the sidelines watching, and where the entire village gathers on game day. That is why the local colours represent more than just a sports team. They also symbolize the community to which people belong. The landscape preserves memories in its own way. A coastal road may be connected to mornings spent traveling to school. A field, fishing harbor, or windswept beach may hold an entire family's childhood. Life here moves more slowly than in the city, but that familiarity creates a sense of security, knowing who lives nearby and who will show up when something happens. Even those who have left Ireland often maintain a deep connection to home. They return for holidays, follow their county team, listen to old songs, and tell their children about the village where their family story began. Distance may change where they live, but it does not easily erase the feeling of where they truly belong. They stay not because Ireland is free of hardship. They stay because, amid the wind, rain, and changes of a modern country, this place still gives them something that is difficult to find elsewhere. Family close by, a community that knows their name, and a land that always feels as though it is waiting for them to return. Ireland emerges as a country rich in identity, where nature, history, and people come together to create a unique appeal. Between its modern cities, windswept countryside, and communities connected across generations, what about life here impressed you the most? Would you like to visit Ireland someday? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can continue joining us on future journeys. See you next time.